Hello everyone. So today I'm going to take you down my memory lane. I recently remembered an event that took place at the end of our block when I was between my 8th grade and freshman year of high school. How I forgot about this, I'm not really sure. Chances are it's because it was damn near 30 years ago, and a lot has happened in my life in the last 30 years. Let's just be honest here. So I was born and raised in this little quiet southwest corner of St. Louis City here in Missouri. Our neighborhood was very quiet. Nothing ever went down. It was always just status quo. Every sixth corner had a Catholic church and school on it, and our neighborhood was divided into parishes, which determined what school you went to. Of course, you knew kids from every school because they were so close, and maybe you can see by the map. I mean, it was a pretty concentrated area. I rode my bike everywhere. I walked to friends' houses. There was always kids, always people out all over this neighborhood. I enjoyed all the freedoms that any kid growing up in the late 80s and early 90s did. Nobody ever worried about anything going on in our neighborhood. It really was never a concern. That all kind of shifted in the summer of 1991. Like I said, I was between my 8th grade and freshman year of high school. The blue dot on the left side of your screen shows where I lived at the time with my grandparents. The blue dot on the right side of your screen denotes the Futo family home. On July 26, 1991, 2 bodies were found inside that home. They were later identified as 53-year-old Emery Futo and his 50-year-old wife, Una Futo. They had 3 sons. Emery was 26, Joe was 23, and Nick was the youngest at the age of 22. Joe was still in college, and he went to school in Kirksville, Missouri. It is what now is known as Truman University. Nick worked at a retail store in the neighborhood, and Emery had moved to California and was living with his wife and newborn son at the time. On July 26, 1991, at around 4:30, police were called to the home to do a welfare check because they hadn't shown up at work, people could not get hold of them, and there was some genuine concern in their group of friends. When police arrived at the home, they discovered the bodies of the parents. The mother was in the hallway and the father was in the basement. Initially, police thought that this was a murder-suicide, but coincidentally, at the same time that the welfare check was being conducted, Nick's body was discovered behind a nearby cemetery, and just an hour and a half later, Joe's body was discovered less than 2 blocks away from the home. The only surviving member of this family is Emery. He is the one who lived in California with his wife and newborn son. Investigators made contact with him on July 27th, which was Saturday, and was filling him in on what had gone on, and he said he had no idea what was happening. He was absolutely shocked. So investigators go to his house to interview him, and they're like, when was the last time you were in St. Louis? When was this? When was that? And he's like, I haven't been to St. Louis in over a year. I talk to my family regularly, this, that, and the other. Well, sadly for Emery, investigators had already determined that he had in fact been in the St. Louis area. So at that point, they placed him under arrest, and Riverside County Sheriff's Department took him into custody. As the investigation went on, detectives were able to uncover a treasure trove of information that directly linked Emery to the crime. In the months leading up to the crime, Emery was asking coworkers if anybody knew where to get an unregistered gun. He asked one coworker specifically, and the coworker said, dude, I could get you a gun, but it will have to be legally registered. Emery was like, nope, want no part in that. I'm out. Just drop it. Never brought it up again. Well, sometime in June, he went to one of his neighbors and asked the same question. I would like to purchase a gun. I want a .38 caliber gun. I want this. I want that. The neighbor was like, well, I have a couple guns for sale. And Emery said, no, those are too expensive. Just keep me posted if you find anything. Okay, cool. So a few weeks later, at the end of June, Emery goes to the neighbor and was like, dude, just call it off. I already took care of it. I don't need anything now. And the neighbor was like, all right, whatever. And the neighbor just went back to his normal routine, didn't think anything of it, and that was the end of that. On July 19th, 1991, just a week before the crimes took place, Emery mailed a package to his brother Nick to the family home on Marquette Avenue in St. Louis City. This package was later determined to contain the gun that was used to commit the crimes. The package was addressed to Nick. Nick's girlfriend said she saw the package, but never really asked Nick what was inside of it because she saw it was from his brother. No big deal. On July 22nd, 1991, just a couple days after mailing the gun and just a couple days prior to the crimes, Emery purchased a round-trip plane ticket from California to St. Louis. He did this under the name Jim Clayton. He was to leave California on July 25th and return to California on July 26th. On July 24th, Nick's girlfriend saw Nick, Emery's brother, writing down a flight number. This was later determined to be the flight number that Jim Clayton was traveling to St. Louis on. Emery arranged a ride to the airport in California through a buddy of his. He just told him, hey dude, I gotta go back home, help my brother with something, and then I'll be back the following day. Could you take me to the airport, drop me off, come back the next day and get me? Buddy's like, yeah, sure. Now, to get out of the house for the night, he didn't want his wife to know that he was going to St. Louis, so he told his wife that he was going camping with a buddy that was giving him a ride. In my opinion, that's pretty ballsy to tell your wife you're just going camping and you're flying halfway across the country. Just my 2 cents on that. So while Emery's in flight to St. Louis, Nick is getting off work at around 5:30 on the 25th of July. As he's getting off work, he has a coworker help him purchase a mallet and a pillow. From there, prosecutors claimed that Nick left work, went out to the airport, got his brother, then brought him back to, the family neighborhood. From my experience driving from that neighborhood to the airport, picking somebody up, and then coming back to said neighborhood, especially at around 5:30 on any given afternoon, you're going to hit traffic. So I would guesstimate that trip took at least an hour and a half to 2 hours. Nick's girlfriend said that he called her around 8:30, said that he had picked up Emery and that he would call her back around midnight. She was like, okay, cool. Well, unfortunately, that was the last time she ever spoke to Nick. At around 9 p.m. on Thursday the 25th, shots were heard behind a cemetery, just about 10 minutes away from the home. Now, witnesses later came forward and said that they saw Emery driving Nick's red Eclipse that night through a parking lot of a nearby apartment complex. And that apartment complex literally backs up to the cemetery. So it's not shocking to me that he would be seen in that particular parking lot. So then around 10 or 10:30 on the 25th, there were witnesses that came forward and said that they saw Emery sitting in his brother's Eclipse within just a couple minutes of the family home. Emery's dad worked for Anheuser-Busch, and he normally arrived home after his shift between midnight and 12:15. At 2:45 a.m., Emery requested a cab from a Denny's around 20 minutes away from the family home, which was en route to the airport. He requested the cab, hopped in, took the cab to another restaurant near the airport, hung out there for a few minutes, went to the airport, hopped his flight, and went back to California, and even returned the next day to work. So on the 26th, when police arrived to do the welfare check, the house looked ransacked, but there was no sign of forced entry. They found the mother deceased on the main floor of the home, and they found the father in the basement. At about the same time as the welfare check, people had discovered Nick's body over by the cemetery. And not long after that, investigators discovered Joe's body just a block and a half away from the family home. 3 of the family members had been shot with a .38 caliber weapon, and 1 was actually beaten to death. It was horrible. Nick's body was found near a dumpster behind the cemetery, and Joe's body was found in the back of his own vehicle underneath bags of trash. Now, Nick's car, the Eclipse, was found on the morning of July 27th, within walking distance of that Denny's that the cab was requested to. So while Riverside County is interviewing Emery, St. Louis detectives are actually discovering his brother's car, which is a car that he is suspected to have driven to all the crime scenes, as well as his getaway back to the airport. So the day after, on July 28th, which was a Sunday, St. Louis detectives flew out to California to interview Emery. Emery was a hot mess, and he gave 3 different timelines depending upon who he was talking to. His first story was that he came to St. Louis to help his brother with a drug deal. His second story said that they were to make this drug deal behind the cemetery, and he had went back to the car to get something, and upon returning, he heard gunshots, so he hopped in the car and took off and fled, went to the parents' house, found them dead, freaked out, jumped on a plane, and just went home and acted like nothing ever happened. In his third story, he said that he saw Nick injure his mother, he saw Nick shoot their father, which we're going to talk about in a second, and then he said that they met Joe at the snow cone stand, hung out with him for a little bit, and that Nick eventually shot him, so they abandoned the car. He said that he and Nick had a suicide pact, and later admitted that he did shoot Nick, but didn't have the balls to shoot himself. So Emery is trying to blame all of this on his brother Nick. Now, according to witnesses, and according to how they found Nick, it was determined that he was shot somewhere around 9 p.m. on the 25th. And investigators knew that Mr. Futo did not return from home until after midnight. So therefore, that was not an option. That Nick did not do that. And as far as Joe goes, I was never really able to confirm exactly when the crime against him would happen. But I do remember when they found his body and that we could not go to the snow cone stand because it's literally right there, and we went there almost every night as kids. The case went to trial in early of 1993. After a month-long trial and 12 hours of deliberation, the jury sentenced him to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He later appealed and was granted a new trial. Despite his best efforts, Emery was not able to lay all the blame on his brother. Prosecutors still maintained that he acted alone. And fairly quickly, a jury convicted him again and gave him the same sentence of 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Although prosecutors wanted the death penalty in his case, they weren't allowed to do that after the first trial. The first trial they pushed for it, the jury didn't go for it. In 1981, the Supreme Court determined that any person who is convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole cannot face the death penalty again if they are awarded a new trial. That falls under double jeopardy, and that gets into a whole big mess. But either way, at the second trial, they couldn't present the idea of the death penalty. So as of today, Emery Futo is 54 years old. He's serving out his sentences at Potosi Correctional Center. There's not much about him that you can find anymore. People pretty much forgot about him, including myself. As far as motives go, there were some discussions in the courtroom about abuse and different things in the home. But at the end of the day, any sort of speculation about motive really doesn't matter because these people still lost their lives senselessly at the hands of their own son and brother. So, that's my trip down memory lane. There's also a bunch of other crimes that happened here in my area that were pretty big for us, and that they do mirror a lot of the high-profile cases that we see on the national spotlights. So I'll probably go down memory lane a little bit more and talk about things that have happened here in the future. But for me, that's it today. That was my memory lane. That was my big aha moment of the week. So now I'm going to have to go and cry because I can remember something that happened 30 years ago. You guys have a great day. We'll talk soon.